Welcome to Freethought Matters. I'm Dan Barker.
And I'm Laurie Gaylor. We're executive directors of the Freedom from Religion Foundation.
Our guest today will be Washington Post contributing columnist Kate Cohen, who asserts in her July article, "As the court forces Christianity on America, it's time for atheists to speak out."
The Freedom from Religion Foundation, which produces Freethought Matters, is the nation's largest association of free thinkers. That's atheists, agnostics, and other non-believers. We invite you to join us in our vital work to keep our secular government free from religious influence. Become a member at ffrf.org or ask for a complimentary copy of our newspaper, Freethought Today. Freedom depends on freethinkers. Watch prior episodes of Freethought Matters on FFRF's YouTube channel.
Kate Cohen, a writer from Albany, New York, is a Washington Post contributing columnist. She also writes documentary scripts, including the Emmy Award-winning Rising, Rebuilding Ground Zero, and the Gold Panda Award-winning How China Works. She's the author of the books A Walk Down the Aisle, Notes on a Modern Wedding, and the Nepi Modena Diaries, Reading Jewish Survival Through My Italian Family.
Kate Cohen's new book, We of Little Faith, will be out in 2023. We asked Kate to join us today because of her poignant column that appeared recently in the Washington Post, titled, "As the Court Forces Christianity on America, It's Time for Atheists to Speak Out." Thank you for joining us today, Kate, and for speaking out.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So why did you write that column?
I wrote that column out of frustration with the tumult of news coming out of not just the Supreme Court, but I guess primarily the Supreme Court, that really seemed to favor a particular conservative Christian worldview, even when it comes to public policy that the rest of us have to live by. And I think all of us are trying to figure out how to respond, what actions we can take. And I feel as if atheists might have a particular role to play in this battle for what's right in American public life, and in preserving the separation of church and state. I think it's super helpful when believers, when religious people stand up and say, "No, wait a minute, this is our private beliefs, and we should not be imposing them on others." But I think the perspective of people for whom God's law is never a factor, no matter how you interpret it, is essential. And so I thought I would speak to fellow non-believers and see if I could get them to be a little more vocal.
Well, your column certainly spoke to us, and we have a motto at the Freedom from Religion Foundation: freedom depends on free thinkers. We think our perspective is very important because we tend to be purists when it comes to the separation of church and state, because it's the atheists who bear the brunt of the problems when we have theocracy. So we certainly were glad to see your column. And of course, you were responding to the repeal of Roe versus Wade, as well as these decisions that a state must fund parochial schools in Maine, and that Coach Kennedy was being wronged by the way he was treated when he was trying to pray as part of his job, right?
Yeah. Certainly, it seems as if religion is getting more protection than human beings at this point. And I mean, with the Kennedy decision, the idea that public prayer, clearly under the auspices of a public school, could potentially be a coercive event, it seems quite clear. It seems quite clear. And I think that the decision actually had to go overboard in trying to imply that he was praying quietly and privately in some way, when that's clearly not the case.
We've all seen the pictures,
Yeah. I feel like, most of the people who need to step up at this moment are going to be believers at some level of the spectrum. That's just the numbers in the United States. But I think it's possible that if you are in a religious tradition, you maybe have a little bit more respect for sincerely held religious belief. And it's possibly a little harder to sort of take a step back and see the way in which it controls the narrative in this country, and shouldn't. So I think that atheist freethinkers have a responsibility to sort of be the clear seers sometimes.
There's a kind of an irony here, isn't there, that while religious privilege is going up and up and up, the number of religious people is going down, 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 and the number of atheists and agnostics, as your column points out, unafraid to put the word atheist in the title of their column.
Using the word atheist, it still is a bit of a shock for some people, I think, and people do want to soften that word. I think we should try to reclaim it for what it simply is, which is just not believing that there's a supreme being in charge, which I believe a lot of people, even who call themselves Jews and Christians and Muslims, don't really believe that there's a supreme being up there in charge of things. But yeah, the word atheist still packs a punch.
Well, we'd like to quote your column a bit because you are urging non-believers to come out of the closet, and you say, atheists, let's lash back against Christian nationalism, and quick. Some people work up a good backlash using boogeymen and lies. They invent a completely fictional world of child grooming, elementary school CRT classes, and sports teams overrun by transgender girls. For our backlash, we don't need to make anything up. To demonstrate the looming threat of theocracy, we can, as atheists tend to do, stick to the evidence, actual laws passed, platforms approved, and rulings handed down. So great words there. Why is it so important for atheists to come out of the closet?
I think there's a general sort of assumption that religious belief is a special category of belief, that it is more sincerely felt than my morality, for example. And even people who aren't strong believers or who aren't believers at all can sometimes share that kind of cultural bias toward religion. And I think that cultural bias is leading us in a scary direction, specifically backward at this point, specifically backward. And so to fight that bias is not just to fight these individual rulings. It's not just to stand up for women's rights and trans rights and gay rights, is to fight even the idea a regular, upstanding, moral person must believe in God.
Have you had any pushback from that column? Any reactions?
Mostly just positive. I think I had more comments than any other column ever.
Wow.
And I'm sure there were nasty things. But I got a lot of people who felt relieved to see something like that in a major paper. It's a scary time to feel that you have, company, that there are people who think like you, who are out there making arguments on your behalf. I guess that can be comforting.
Well,
so mostly
this is what we often hear when columnists do write as atheists, that they do get such gratitude that they're speaking out.
Remember Natalie Angier 20 years ago? She had that big column that came out in the Times.
Why I'm an Atheist.
Right.
So, Kate, your column is warning specifically against the dangers of Christian nationalism. Yes. And that's still a new term to many. Can you explain that and what those dangers are?
Other people have written much more substantially on this topic. But I believe it's the conflation of this sort of biblical worldview with U.S. law, and the myth making that sees the U.S. as fundamentally a Christian nation, and that the ultimate goal of these Christian conservative activists being the establishment of Christian law as the law of the land. So that's it. And to me, that's quite scary.
Well, you wrote about, I think it was the Texas Republican Party, their party platform that contains opposition to gay marriage and what else?
Opposition to gay marriage, returning the Bible to the classroom, I believe was one of them. I'd have to look.
The Ten Commandments.
Yes, the Bible, Ten Commandments, God, prayer should be back in the classroom.
Pretty much a Christian nationalist agenda, huh?
It was a biblical view. Obviously, no reproductive rights for women, and the separation of church and state. I can't remember who soon after that said that the separation of church and state was just a fiction. It's not a real thing. That's terrifying.
It is terrifying to see members of Congress saying these kinds of things.
Exactly.
The level of ignorance or willful ignorance is pretty astonishing.
Like the rest of us don't even exist. The only Americans are Christians. And don't they know the country is much more diverse than their image?
Well, I think that knowing that might be part of what's spurring this sort of grasping of power at this moment. I mean, even it sort of goes back to what you just said about the rise of Christian nationalism and the happening at the same time as sort of the diminishing of actual Christian Christian worship. Number of churchgoers absolutely is going down. Number of believers is going down.
So
I don't think
panicking.
They're scared.
They might be panicking. I don't think that's. I don't think those two things are disconnected. So it's interesting. It's interesting to see. Maybe that's their backlash to some extent. The thing is that as I sort of alluded to, the ways in which they are being oppressed are fictional. So they are lashing back potentially against things that don't even exist. They're lashing back against the attempt to make a more inclusive, more just society, which would not infringe on their beliefs or their right to live their life as they want.
So we are talking with Kate Cohen, a contributing columnist for the Washington Post. And after our break, we want to ask you, Kate, about your article, A Question for Those Who Say More Faith Will Prevent Gun Violence. And you say, how? So we'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Ron Reagan, an unabashed atheist.
When I first recorded that commercial back in 2014, being openly atheist in America was still fairly uncommon. Today, the fastest growing religious group in the country is the non-religious, especially among the young. That progress is heartening, but the religious pushback is fierce and the forces of Christian nationalism are well organized. Our progress won't continue unless we work together so that reason and our secular constitution will prevail. That's why I'm asking you to join the Freedom from Religion Foundation, the nation's largest and most effective association of atheists and agnostics working to keep state and church separate, just like our founders intended. Please join the Freedom from Religion Foundation today. Ron Reagan, lifelong atheist, not afraid of burning in hell.
My name's Jarvis, and I'm an out-of-the-closet atheist. There are many reasons why I'm an atheist, but I'll start with the crudest explanation. I'm sure many of you have seen Clash of the Titans or The Immortals or 300, these blockbuster films about ancient Greek or Roman religion, which we now call mythology. But back then it wasn't mythology. It was very real for them. They genuinely believed that you had to put a coin in a person's mouth before they were buried so that they could pay for the literal ferry to the afterlife. Just as many people today believe that they should eat crackers and wine on a Sunday, or that God wants women to hide their bodies under black burqas. Every religion that has ever existed, and there are many, have all believed that they were right, that their rituals and rules and beliefs were 100% correct, and they all thought they nailed it. But where are they today? If they're not completely forgotten, they're on the silver screen, amusing us with their sword fights, animal sacrifices, and oracles. The religions of today are the entertainment of tomorrow. Everyone, I hope, is an atheist about Zeus and Apollo, Juno and Poseidon. I just added Jesus and Muhammad to that list.
And welcome back to Freethought Matters. We're talking with author and Washington Post contributing writer and outspoken happy atheist, Kate Cohen, about the looming threats of Christian nationalism, as well as how to talk to children about being a non-believer. Kate, you've written a number of articles and columns, and you have a recent one about God and guns. What was that called?
I'm not sure what title they put on it, but the premise was actually asking Republicans who asserted after the shooting at Uvalde that we didn't need more gun control. What we needed was more God, more faith, more prayer, more 10 Commandments in the classrooms. Actually saying to them, okay, how would that work? How would it help? In the congressional debates, they would make these statements. They would assert these things. And their Democratic colleagues would do the natural thing, which was to ignore it entirely and assume that it was just a way of dodging the real issues. But I think it would be, and I think it was, an interesting exercise to take them seriously. How would it help? Clearly, first of all, we are, relatively speaking, a very religious nation among wealthy nations, and of course, by far the most violent, the most suffering when it comes to gun violence. So, okay, but let's just say we all started to take religion more seriously. My point was that religion, being a believer, doesn't keep you from doing bad things. And in fact, that every major religion includes in it procedures for when people stray from the path. So yes, there are moral codes like the Ten Commandments, and there are protocols for when you stray from those precepts.
And the Ten Commandments tells you that one version says up to the 10th generation in your family shall be smited, because if you have another god. I mean, how does that?
Oh, well, I didn't even get into the problems, because with the Ten Commandments, of which there are many. If you just like decide you're going to live by those 10 rules, you're leaving a lot out. But yes, of course, But let's just say that you did decide, even believers, even people who follow those, can stray. They can commit crimes. All those things can happen. Being a believer does not prevent those things. And being a non-believer doesn't mean you don't have a moral code. So there's some other problem that's contributing to our gun crisis.
Which probably
I can't imagine what that might be.
What could that be?
But...
I mean, maybe the proliferation of guns and barely any regulations.
That's what that is.
Yeah.
And I know that's what they're trying to avoid, right. and deflect from. But I think that there is, in this country still a sort of knee-jerk assumption that there is some moral leadership or moral height to be reached if you are a believer.
Well, when I was a minister, I would have thought, simplistically, this is dumb, but if one of those shooters had seen the Ten Commandments on the wall of their high school as they were going between classes, it would have caused them to stop and think, and the Spirit of God would have entered them so that they would become a more gentle and more moral person. I mean, what's the harm in that? That's what I would have thought would have happened. Of course, that's not what happens in real life, is it?
No, they made me take that. I actually had something about that in my column, and they made me take it out because they thought it was too flippant. But no, people know right from wrong. Even psychopaths know right from wrong. They just don't do right all the time. We just don't do right all the time. It's not a matter of knowing what the rules are, or knowing what right and wrong is. It's totally different. Anyway, the point, as you say, is completely that easy access to guns, especially in the case of mass shootings, these weapons of war that are just completely unnecessary for civilians to own. But so that was my point, just to take that argument at face value and see where it took me. And that was kind of fun to write, although it was a sad situation.
So we want to save time to talk about your book that's coming out in 2023. Yeah. And what is that called again?
It's called We of Little Faith, How Non-Believers Can Be True to Themselves, Live Full Lives, and Save America.
I love that subtitle.
We'll have to carry that book.
Oh, yes. But some of this book... I know that you have written other columns, for example, a column about talking with your daughter when she was younger about atheism and God.
We put that in our newspaper.
Yeah, we reprinted that in Freethought today. So what's this new book about?
This book it actually is sort of related to that column, in a sense that I'm urging people to be honest with themselves and with their families and with their communities about what they really believe. And primarily, the book discusses how wonderfully freeing that is in one's own life, how it opens up one's relationships with one's children, to be talking about what you really, really think, and not simply to be passing on the received wisdom about, heaven and God. And so primarily I talk about it on a personal level, including trying to find, as a parent, but just also as a human, how to replace some of the things that religion gives us that are really vital in terms of finding ways to mark time, finding ways to feel gratitude, finding ways to celebrate, finding ways to think about death, looking at where we get our morality, if it's not from religion. So I talk about it, and a lot of it is on that sort of more personal level. The moment that I started being honest about what I believed, I really found that I had much better conversations with friends, people who might be friends. And I found so many people that I was shocked to discover felt the same way. So it's really something that people kind of keep hidden from others and also from themselves, I think. So there's not the saving America part is in there. I do think that it would shift politics in this country if people could help make what we think the American populace is actually reflective of what it truly is.
Well, thank you, Kate Cohen. It's been a real pleasure having you on our show today.
We look forward to your new book, We of Little Faith. And thank you for watching Free Thought Matters.
Because free thought matters.
Hi, I'm Steve Pinker. In my book, Enlightenment Now, I show that the world has become a better place as reason has been overcoming superstition and tribalism. But the values of the Enlightenment are under attack. That's why I'm a proud member of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, the nation's largest association of free thinkers working to keep state and church separate. Please join me in supporting the Freedom from Religion Foundation to ensure that our government is driven not by religion, but by reason.